welcome to the Pages of Light podcast, your destination for discussions of popular fantasy and science fiction novels from a Christian worldview. My name is Tyler, and with me, as always, is Gabriel, aka the Quarantine Quartermaster. Welcome back to the podcast, Gabe. How's it going?
Oh, it's going well. So at the time of this recording, I am looking forward to eating Thanksgiving dinner. But the time that the listeners hear this, I will have already eaten the dinner. So I just hope that everyone had a good Thanksgiving. They were thankful for something, and they shared that love and that experience with their friends and gave thanks to God and did all the things. So so that just is me saying I'm looking forward to turkey, cranberry stuffing, and all the other good turkey food I can't even think of right now.
So is your favorite Thanksgiving course the turkey?
Oh, I do like the turkey. I do like the dark meat. Sometimes we get really good stuffing. And my mom makes these sweet potatoes with like orange like ground up in it. So it's like sweet potatoes, and then it has like an orange flavor in addition. And she puts like walnuts and whipped cream on top. I mean, It's basically a dessert, but I get to serve it up with dinner. So like,
that's right. It's
obviously like double or triple dessert.
Yeah, there you go. Nice. My favorite Thanksgiving thing has to be the stuffing.
Oh yeah, stuffing is good.
Does
yours come with
stuffing.
Meat?
No, it's
some of them
just
have like.
I think my mom always buys the stovetop, whatever brand that is, stovetop stuffing. So
yeah,
I don't know.
It's such a comfort food. You just eat it and you just like want to lay down and take a nap.
Yeah, that's right. Let us know your favorite Thanksgiving item down in the comments. And if you're listening to this in like July, doesn't matter. Still tell us your favorite Thanksgiving.
Go for it. Just go for it.
We want to know. Cool. Yeah. And by the time when this was released, December will have started. So happy holidays, Christmas, Hanukkah, all those other things. So yes. Make sure you go to pagesoflight.com to check out all the other stuff that we're doing. And you can also follow us on social media. Subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on audio, all the other social platforms. Find us over there. So in this episode, we're going to be starting a new book / new series, although this is just a one-off because it's technically a prequel to a trilogy, which is the Bartimaeus series. So I guess originally there was a trilogy of books released. When was that, in like the 90s? Was that when they came out?
I would have to check, but I believe the three books are The Amulet of Samarkand, which is book 1, The Golem's Eye, which is book 2, and Ptolemy's Gate, which is book 3.
Right.
And yeah, this is kind of the fourth book written. So he wrote those 3, then he wrote this one, and you've kind of been thrown in at the deep end with all of like the genies and the summonings and the circles, and like, you know, how the magicians like work with the demons and stuff. And you know, the author Jonathan Stroud has had a lot of time to develop this world. So you're getting it like full tilt. Nothing's held back.
I'm getting the fire hose straight up.
Yep.
So this book is called The Ring of Solomon. It was released in 2010. And yeah, it's a prequel to the original series that Gabe just mentioned. So we get to go back. You said the trilogy was set in like the Industrial Revolution type period.
Yeah, like post-Industrial Revolution. There are cars, but I feel like they're like the original like 50s like big black cars that take up a lot of space. And so it's about a magical society that's like the magicians are the ruling class over the commoners, in basically like England.
Right. So in this book, we're going about 1,000 years previously, because this book is set in 950. Oh no, it's more than 1,000 years. What am I talking about? This would be like almost
2000.
almost 3,000
Yeah,
years.
almost.
Yeah, almost
Yep.
3,000 years in the past, because we're going all the way back to 950 BC, as it says on the back of the book, during the rule of King Solomon. Hence the name, The Ring of Solomon. So, yeah, a little bit different type of book than we normally read. So yeah, it's gonna be exciting. What did you? I guess so. You've read the original series. What was your favorite thing about the original series?
I like Bartimaeus as a character. We were talking a little bit before the podcast started. He's just so like vain and full of himself. He does like some amazing things, but he's also kind of like a bungler in some ways. Like
Yep.
he just like he will just mess things up, and he does not care that that the magicians have complete power over him. He's always going to give them back chat and give them a
Right.
hard time, no matter what they're doing. And yeah, so he's just trying to make the best of his like servitude. Like he's like, I gotta be here, and I just find his dialogue funny, and I also just love Jonathan Stroud's ability to just describe things. His vocabulary choices just are very appealing to me, and I just read these books and I wish that I could have the vocabulary that he does eloquently, like in context, in a conversation. I just love the way that he describes things. I think that he just does an excellent job. And there's some descriptions from like, I can even remember from like books 1 and 2 that just have stuck with me over the years. Like he has created like these strong visual images in my brain using his
Right.
words, and yeah, I think he's a great wordsmith.
Cool.
And I am a delinquent co-host here because I do not have a favorite quote this week or last week or the week before. And I'm going crazy. So I have to ask you, did you get a favorite quote for this week?
I did get a favorite quote.
All right.
Although
let's hear
it did take me a second to after I finished the section that we were going to read, I didn't have one immediately. I had to go back and look through my highlights to think of figure out a good one to pick. So this quote isn't like, it's not super profound or anything, but I just thought it was an interesting kind of take on just the character of Solomon and how Jonathan Stroud's version of Solomon in this book is different than the biblical character of Solomon. Well, not character, real person Solomon that we would know from the biblical story. So this is on page 52 on the paperback, if you have that. And Bartimaeus, this is just like his inner monologue, I believe. And he says, "The ring, that was the heart of it all. That was why Jerusalem flourished." And there's a few other things that he says going on after that quote. But I just like this quote because, like I said, it points to like a different picture of what Solomon is in this book. And it's almost like in this story, Solomon's ring is a replacement for God in the story, because as far as I know, in this book, God is not mentioned, and the reason for Jerusalem and Israel's wealth and power is because Solomon individually has this super powerful ring. So Solomon is relying on his own like willpower and own power instead of on the power of God working through him and through the chosen people of Israel. So I just thought that was an interesting kind of setup for the story that was different from how biblical Solomon actually was as a character. So it's making it more Solomon individual character focused and less about God focused. So yeah, that was just my
I like the quote that you chose and like the reason why you chose it, because I don't know Solomon that well from reading the Bible, but I know his book of Proverbs. I read Proverbs is probably one of my favorite books in the whole Bible, because I always read it and I always have applications like that day or the next day, or I feel convicted by something, and those are Solomon's words. He is credited with being the wisest person to ever walk. And yes, that it's kind of, I feel that Solomon, the way he's portrayed in this book, and like he has the ring, like that's just someone who is incredibly like wealthy and they can do these things, and it is a replacement for God. And in the Bible it talks about, not placing all of your trust in your wealth and your comfort and yes, relying on God. And I also think that happens. I think of like throwing neighborhood parties and stuff, and then you just go and food is provided for you, your kids are safe, and people do that all the time. They like have people over and stuff, and people who aren't aware that all good things flow from God will say like, oh yeah, my friends take care of me, and like they build this worldly view of like where all the good is coming from, when God is the source of all good. And they look to those worldly things instead of to our maker and the true
right,
God who gives all things that are good. So good choice.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and we'll hop into the book discussion here as well, because we'll start off talking about Solomon. Actually, no, we're going to start off talking about the opening chapter, or the opening section, which is chapters 1 through 3, which is Bartimaeus, his like opening, his like intro sequence to the book. So this is my first introduction to Bartimaeus. Do you want to recap us what exactly happened in this first section where we get to meet Bartimaeus?
Sure, and just fill in any of the gaps. So Bartimaeus is a genie who's been summoned by Ezekiel, who is one of Solomon's court wizards, and he is being his Bartimaeus self, where he's just kind of always challenging. He appears in the like he either challenges like intellectually, but in this case he's also like taken a female form to kind of like throw his master off his game, and try and get him to mess up, because if the magician ever leaves the circle, they are the demon can have complete control over them before, basically they're going to kill them. And Bartimaeus says that's what we all love to do. We love to kill our masters and we love to go home. Like that's
just
so. Yeah. So Ezekiel tasks Bartimaeus with capturing an item of great power, and so he sends him across the deserts to this remote location. And Bartimaeus he's doing a good job. He gets in there, he's fighting some skeletons, and he blows this one skeleton up. His head like pops off, and he triggers like a sensor like inside the. So if you're just new to the series, there's these things called the 7 planes of existence. And so as humans, we can see the first plane, everything in the material world. And then as you go deeper into the planes, you can see more and more things. And the lower like class of demons, like the imps and the foliates, they can see on, well, foliates probably can see on all 7 planes. Anyone can... after foliate, like jinn and afrits and marids can see onto the 7th plane. And so there's these wards that are set up that are like these spiritual wards in the tomb, and Bartimaeus trips them, and he gets this high level entity saying, you cannot take this dragon figurine away from me. I've been charged with saving it. And so Bartimaeus ends up having a discussion, and they have a little bit of a brawl, but the tomb collapses in on itself, and Bartimaeus escapes with the artifact. And and then again, I just love Jonathan Stroud's like description of Ezekiel and how he has avarice in his eye, and his mouth like dripped with anticipation. Like he's painting like the magicians as these like power hungry people who can't even like control themselves, which is
right.
what he kind of builds them as. But Bartimaeus gets Ezekiel tripped up. He uses the little figurine, and I think he fires like maybe like a jet of water or something at Ezekiel, and it causes him to break the barrier of the circle of binding. And Bartimaeus gets to kill Ezekiel, and then he is dismissed to the other place because he's no longer bound by the magician because the magician is dead. And he's like, "Oh, I'm off to freedom. See you later." And that is part 1 of the book. Anything that you need to add?
No, yeah, you covered it pretty well. Yeah, I mean, you were talking about how they paint the magicians in this book, and again, it's interesting because Solomon and Israel it's like they're the bad guys in this story. They're like the bad magicians, and they're the ones in power. And yeah, it's just interesting that all of the biblical characters are painted as like these power hungry kind of characters.
But you also get when Asmira is riding with the caravan later. We'll get to that part. You do hear like Solomon has done great good as well. So true. You know, there is some like, you know, Asmira, you know, and right. I'll let you get into her storyline, but you know, she has one way of viewing Solomon, and then her view is challenged when she's on this like caravan ride to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
So with that, should I do a little bit of background on King Solomon?
Yeah, go for it, because the next chapter is Solomon's chapter, so we get to see a little bit about who he is as a character and his motives and stuff like that. But Gabe's going to give us a little bit of a rundown on who the biblical character of Solomon was.
Yeah, so I searched up an article that I thought had some interesting points, and I'm not going to read the whole thing. If you'd like to see more about it, there'll be a link in the description. So who was King Solomon, the beginner's guide? This is from overviewbible.com/Solomon. So King Solomon was the son of David and the third king of Israel. Like his father, Solomon reigned for 40 years, probably from 970 to 931 BC. He is often referred to as the wisest and wealthiest man who ever lived, and he's a traditional author of multiple books of the Bible, all which fall into poetry section of the Old Testament. Solomon also built God's first temple in Jerusalem, which is why it's known as Solomon's Temple. So what is he known for? So a few things. He asked God for wisdom. Solomon asked for wisdom and knowledge so that he could better govern God's people. He was incredibly wealthy. So Solomon obviously inherited a great deal of wealth from his father, David, who built up an immense treasury through spoils of war. To help Solomon build the temple, David set aside 100,000 talents of gold and 1,000,000 talents of silver, as well as quantities of bronze and iron too great to be weighed. But Solomon just didn't live off his father's fortune. God's promise to give Solomon wisdom included a promise to give him wealth, and God delivered. And then they cite Chronicles 29:25. The Lord highly exalted Solomon in the sight of all of Israel and bestowed on him a royal splendor such as no king over Israel had ever had before. So he built the God's temple. That's another thing on here. He had many wives. Solomon was God's anointed, and God blessed him tremendously. He wasn't exactly famous for his purity. According to 1 Kings 11:3, Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines.
That's a lot.
I know sometimes I think one wife is a lot, so I don't know how that works. Okay. So here it says he promoted idolatry, since ancient religions were so deeply embedded in their cultures of origin. Marrying foreigners exposed the Israels to their gods, rituals, and traditions that shaped their worldview and behaviors. Idols were revered as an embodiment of God's represented. So bringing idols and idol worship into your home was under the influence of other gods. Another thing was he wrote and spoke many proverbs. And like I said earlier, Proverbs is definitely one of my favorite books. So that all is from the overviewbible.com website. And I just thought those were some interesting points and kind of gives you a background on King Solomon here.
Yeah. So he did a lot of good things, and he did some not so good things, which is like most characters in the Bible. Not most of the characters in the Bible are known for some great things, but they're also known for some bad things. Like Peter, he's the rock of the church, but he also denied Jesus 3 times. So, just goes to show God can use imperfect people to do amazing things, and you can be one of those people as well. So that's always a good reminder to us. So you don't have to be perfect to serve God.
Yeah, and don't try and wait till you're good enough for God.
Right.
Because,
won't happen.
Yeah, that. The only person who was good enough for God was Jesus. And so
right.
We are very lucky that when God sees us, he sees Jesus. If we love and believe in Jesus, because I know I waited to be like good enough for God. Like, I just need to get my act together before I go to God, and that is it's just not going to happen. You need to start seeking God now and knowing that he's the God of the universe and he can bring you to him, and he can help you heal. You just have to be open, and you have to start seeking him. It just won't happen on its own.
Right. It's a good word. So continuing with Solomon in this book, so the next scene after Bartimaeus' little opening part there, we get a scene with Solomon and just get to be introduced to him as a character. And so he finds out that Ezekiel was killed, and he's not very happy about that, of course. And he's amazed that it says a mere jinni is the perpetrator. Because I guess the jinn they're kind of in the middle of the totem pole in terms of the spirit world. So you said before there's the imps, there's the foliots, there's the jinn, then there's the afrits, right? And then there's the Mareebs.
I always hear it pronounced like married.
Married?
Like, yep. Like married. It's almost like the past tense of marry, but like maybe married. I think you're saying it. I just hear it in the book so often that my mind kind of just like changes it into the word I want it to be. It's so terrible. I need to listen to the phonetic enunciation.
But it's interesting because there's the Mareed with a D, but then there's also a place called Mareeb with a B. So double confusing. So you can't confuse the spirit and the place.
Right.
So he's not very happy that a mere jinn of the 4th level. I don't remember specifically what the 4th level means. I guess that's like the level of jinn that he is. I guess there's different types of jinn. Maybe you get more details about that in the original trilogy.
Actually, you know what's interesting? Just quick side note.
Side quest.
Side quest. So this is the only incongruity that I have found in the books, is that in book 1, I think he puts Bartimaeus at the 14th level. And then I think he like just reduces it down to the 4th level. And so,
but this is 3,000 years prior. So, I mean, he's had 3,000 years to climb 10 levels. So, I mean, that seems reasonable to me.
Yeah, but I think like later in the series, like he calls him a 4th level. So I think like at some point in his brain, he's like, I'm not going to be that precise or something. Like the 14th level is like, you know,
that's a lot of levels.
Yeah, like classifications, like, because, in his brain, he's like, there probably has to be some qualifying factor that would separate the 13th level from the 14th level. Yes. And then, like, am I really going to build that up in my brain so that I know? And then it was just like, probably like the fourth level, that's much more manageable. I don't know his brain, but that's just kind of how I explained it, because I do believe it's first called the 14th level, and then it drops to the fourth, and then again in this book it's of the fourth level. So
if this was an epic fantasy, 14 books like Wheel of Time, he would have mapped them all out.
Oh yeah.
But because I guess this is considered a YA book, right? I would say, like, it's
young
not
adult.
it's not necessarily, not that adults can't read it. We're adults
Dude,
reading it, but it's more targeted towards. It's easier to read for a younger audience, I would say. Easier to understand.
I love young adult stuff. Although his vocabulary is very good.
Yeah, indeed. But yes, we were talking about Solomon, and so he finds out that Ezekiel's killed, and he doesn't like that, and so he summons. He asks Kaba, which is one of his magicians in his court.
There you go.
I'm just thinking of Kaba as a musician. It just makes me laugh. So Kaba is one of his magicians, and he asks Kaba to resummon Bartimaeus to be his slave, essentially, and he has a bunch of other spirits that are under him as well, ones that have done things that Solomon didn't like, and so Kaba's kind of the leader of the outcast spirits, it seems like. And so he gets put into his service, and they're given this charge that they have to do all this manual labor, because they're basically being punished, so they have to do like crappy work. So that's what he is going to be required to do. And then we also get a scene. It's basically, imagine like King Solomon is in his court, in his throne room, and people are coming up to him and like bringing the news of the day. Here's what's happened in your realm today, and he has to make decisions about these things. So he makes the decision about Bartimaeus and with Kaba, and then he also has to make a decision about the Queen of Sheba, whose name is Balkis, and he's basically trying to like rule their kingdom, and he wants them to pay tribute, essentially. And I think originally he wanted to marry her, if I'm not mistaken, and she's refused him a bunch of times. And in the next chapter, chapter 5, we get Balkis's point of view from this, and he's gonna basically like give her one final chance to come to amends with King Solomon and to pay tribute, essentially. And if she refuses, then it's not going to be a good time. I don't think it specifically spells out what he's going to do to the kingdom of Sheba if she declines, but that's basically what happens with that. And then there's one final scene where his I guess it's kind of in the midst of this. One of his viziers, I think it was, he suggests that you should just use the ring and go down there and like wipe him out or something. And Solomon doesn't like his viziers like telling him what to do, essentially, and so he threatens them using his ring to threaten them. And it described, I think you mentioned it earlier, like this presence of the ring.
It's like towering and silent, and everyone is just very intimidated.
Yeah, it reminds me of that scene in Lord of the Rings. I'm always going to bring in Lord of the Rings because that's my thing. I
know you are.
So it reminds me of that scene in Lord of the Rings whenever Gandalf is using the black speech, and there's like the shadow comes in, and it's like this dark energy is like entering the area, and like everyone's like, oh my gosh, what's happening? So that's what it reminded me of.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Any comments about Solomon, this scene, this chapter, and what's going on there?
Just the night and day difference from like what Solomon is like able to summon in this time is so much more than in the future trilogy books, where like that seems to always be a thing. Like Wheel of Time, like, before the breaking of the world, the Aes Sedai, were so much more powerful. when Bo is defending the Mountain Watch and he's talking about the privileges of old and how they built these walls 1,000 years ago and the magic still holds. And, in this book, we have like King Solomon, who's able to summon like all these afrits and marids and jinn just by touching his ring. He's not even a magician. Like they say that in the book. He doesn't know like how to make the binding pentagram to summon the demon and all that. He just has the ring, and so he has got all this like magical force at his disposal. So I just find that interesting, that it's such a different scene from like the future, where magicians still are the ruling class, but they are just they're nerfed. They're just not as powerful.
Yeah, that's definitely true. A lot of fantasy is, it's almost like a lot of them are set in time periods where they look back at things that were and how like it was like a golden age or something like that, and we've lost that and we're trying to get back to it. And I think that's like, from a biblical perspective, that really speaks to like just the nature of like the human experience, because as human beings, we did have a golden age in the Garden of Eden, and we were one with our Creator, and that cycle has been broken, and we are now in a fallen state, and we as humans are trying to get back to our true nature and our true bodies. And I think that's just like a deeply human thing. Like there's something that's like missing in this world. Like there's, whether it's justice or like just in your own life, like you don't feel fulfilled in all the stuff that you're doing. And there's just a sense of like, things can be better. Things should be better. And one day, according to the biblical story, things will be better when Jesus comes back. And so I think that's something that's just like deeply embedded into the human psyche of wanting things to be better than they are now. So yeah, I don't know.
That's a good word, Tyler. And you know what I'm going to say is, like, that's all true, but so many people are lost that they don't even know to like look for God, and that's why, part of the reason why we're doing this podcast, Tyler and I went to a men's breakfast together, and we were thinking about how we hope that this show has an impact on your life, the listener, your life, that you can kind of see the things that we talk about and apply it to your own walk with Christ, because that's good discipleship, and we want that to happen. But I was, back to everyone. Some people just don't even know that they're lost. Yeah. And I think it's our job to find those people and try and turn them to the light in any way that we can. Because it's just so sad that some people like don't even have a shot, to get to heaven, because no one's able to give them the good word and the gospel. So that's why God calls us to be disciples, so that we can share that with other people.
Yeah, fulfill the Great Commission.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, so that's the scene with Solomon, and we get a few other scenes with Solomon a little bit later on, but that's the main scene we get with him in this half of the book. I'm sure we get some more scenes with him later on. But I don't know if I mentioned, for this podcast, we did parts 1 and 2, which is chapters 1 through 20. That's what we're doing in this podcast. So, and then for part 2, we will finish the book and do, I think it's chapters 21 to 38. I think that is the end. Mm-hmm. So there you go. The next scene we get is with Balkis, who I mentioned earlier, with Solomon's chapter, and she's the Queen of Sheba, and their capital is Marib, not to be confused with Marid, the spirit. And in her scene, she's basically in the previous scene, Solomon sends a messenger to Balkis, and in this scene, she is getting that messenger's information from King Solomon. And Balkis is kind of like, I've already said no to you guys like a ton of times, or the last 3 or 4 times. And he's like, well, you're gonna have to answer it again, essentially. And so basically he wants her to pay a ransom of 40 sacks of frankincense or be destroyed. So that's basically his terms. And Balkis doesn't really want to be in the... They actually make a comment, now that I'm talking about this. I think the guy makes a comment that your kingdom is super wealthy, like 40 sacks of frankincense, like, is not going to hurt you guys. Like, it's not going to be...
Yep.
It's not going to affect their wealth and their status. But Balkis still does not want to be under the thumb of King Solomon. They want to remain independent. So it just kind of shows her character and how she doesn't want to be bullied around by Solomon, even though he's super powerful. But she stands up to him. So that's a cool thing about her character. I think she's standing up for what she believes in, even though he could probably just destroy her pretty quickly.
Yeah, she wants to remain sovereign over her land and her country, and and I think she's one of the few leaders who is actually standing up to Solomon.
Right. So after the messenger leaves, she does this seems like she does this little kind of test thing where she breaks this alarm, and essentially the first guard that gets to her room is the one that she's going to charge with going off to try to assassinate Solomon. So I just thought that was an interesting little thing that she did. It's like, whoever gets here the quickest will be my best guard, and that'll be the person who can assassinate Solomon.
Enter Asmira.
Enter Asmira, right. So this is where we get Asmira. She's a captain, a guard captain, and
she's one of the main characters in the book.
She is. So for the most of the book, we'll be following her and Bartimaeus. And so the start of her story is that Balkis is asking her to go and assassinate Solomon, and it has to be done within 2 weeks because that was the time limit that Solomon gave Balkis of when her decision had to be made. So she's got to get there quick and do the job, and then get out, hopefully. So yeah, there you go. That's basically the setup for the story, and then now we're gonna jump back to Bartimaeus, where Gabe can take us away for what's going on next.
Yeah. So Bartimaeus leaves after he kills Ezekiel, and he's like, I'm free. I'm going back to the other place. And so...
not so fast.
Yeah, not so fast. So he gets back for a day, and then he's summoned back to Israel under Kaaba, who is basically sadistic. And he meets the other jinn who are going to be in Kaaba's service. And so there's I think Gazeri is a foliate who's kind of Kaaba's eyes and ears on things.
Yeah.
And then there's
in the
Fakwal.
book. In the book, there's this nice little chart of all the spirits, and I don't know if you can see that up there. So that's a very handy chart in the paperback there.
Oh, that is nice.
Yeah, so Jazeri is a folia in the service to Kaaba the Cruel, is what they call him.
Oh, I didn't know he was Kaaba the Cruel, but yeah, that definitely makes sense.
That's a correct name.
Oh, Kaaba the Cruel. There we go. And him and Fakwal have history together. They've been on opposite sides, but now they're in servitude together. And it starts with manual labor of building the temple. They have to but Bartimaeus has this plan, which, because he's Bartimaeus, he's going to drive his other master and the other jinn that he's working with up the wall, and he raises his hand. He's like, I find this unsatisfactory. And Kaaba is like, what? And he's like, you've paired me with all these fools, and that one over there, he's fat, and I just love Bartimaeus' banter. It is just so funny. And then so the scene devolves into chaos. All the jinn are fighting and saying, you said this about me and all of this. And Kaaba's had enough, and he gets out the essence flail So all like spirits are made of an essence, and that is like their quote unquote like soul, and they are not bound by any particular form here on the material plane. They choose a form, and they can change shapes into animals or cryptid creatures or humans or anything that they want to be. But Kaba starts swinging this flail around and essentially like pierces them, and he's like got them like up in the air, and they're like flying and like colliding each other like a bad like trampoline park experience, and then they all crash to earth, and they're all dazed, and he's like, and they all had like put on these like horns or changed their skin color so that they were slightly, you know, not human, and he's doesn't like that. And so he puts them to work, and they are, you know, building this temple, and they're told not to use any magical powers. And then Kaba like is no longer sending Gazeri to like spy on them, and then they just like start like levitating these huge bricks and just like, you know, moving it, and then they're supposed to have a watch out. You know,
well, it's like
hey, get
classic. If you ever worked like a retail job, it's classic. Like your manager is not really watching you, so you just like kind of do your job half of what you would normally do it. Everyone's been in those positions where you're not giving your 100%. You're kind of you're cutting corners. You're doing all those things because the boss is out of town. It's essentially what's happening.
Yep. And no one's checking in, and so Bartimaeus starts singing songs about Solomon's wives and how he is like Bartimaeus the Great, and you know, just carrying on. And then Solomon shows up, and Bartimaeus just runs. Like that's his immediate like reaction. But there's like some sort of like event, or like I don't know what happens, but all like Solomon's wives are like flung in all these different directions, and he touches the ring, and all these jinn and afrits appear to catch the wives and to save them from being thrown all over the sands. And Solomon is not happy. But then he talks to Bartimaeus, who basically is like pleading for his life.
Yeah, he's like groveling.
Yep, being sycophantic, you know, just telling Solomon how great he is. And Solomon's actually entertained. He's like, I don't even need my jugglers tonight. You've so overacted yourself.
If Bartimaeus is anything, he's entertaining.
He is. I like Bartimaeus. He's a good guy. I named my first D&D character after him, Bartimaeus.
Wow,
who died in a wizard tired.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's right. You told us about that earlier in one of the podcasts.
And now,
what's your name now?
We're starting D&D. Bartimaeus. Like I'm gonna be a bard character. Yeah.
Right. What's your musical instrument of choice as a bard?
I think it's a lyre.
A lyre. Okay. Some people do the lute.
Yep.
Or you could do a flute, like a little piccolo.
Yep. There's like 7 different specialties that you could choose from to like be good at for music, and I'm still kind of like some people just choose it, and I'm like, oh, it's not speaking to me. I want to like change it because it's not, you know, critical in the long run.
Right.
So.
Well, you'll have to whenever you start, you'll have to give us the update on what musical instrument you decided to pick.
We're starting tomorrow.
Okay, so you have to make a decision here.
I do. I need to get on it, and I need to make a My Mini factory so I can resin print my Mini and then paint it up and, you know, have that for adventures and stuff.
There you go.
It's gonna be sweet.
Nice.
But I digress. Side quest complete.
That's right.
All right, so Solomon is upset with Kaba for letting his genie get out of control, and so he says, you and your jinn are going out into the desert. You're going to find these bandits who are infesting my land, and you're going to bring them to justice. And so Kaba is exiled. He no longer has the favor of King Solomon, and he's upset.
Yes.
And so I guess we have to get to the end of Bartimaeus' story. So a few more critical things happen.
We could take a little side quest or a side tangent, because there's like an interlude where we get a Kaba chapter, and we basically get a section where Kaba, before they leave to go on this trip out into the desert, Kaba's talking to all of his, is it his Marid, Amet, I think he might be talking to. He's talking with all of his spirits,
his
basically.
Shadow.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there's this weird thing with Kaba where he has that, like, shadow that follows him around.
Mm-hmm. And it's, like, a little slower than normal, or it's just not,
Yeah.
Bartimaeus and
he comments on it, yeah.
Yeah, he notices it. And then Bartimaeus has this weird experience while they're, like, hunting. Like, Kaba's shadow just, like, appears around the corner and just, like, gets bigger and bigger and bigger and just, like, goes out, and Bartimaeus is like, what is going on? Yep. And he gets out of there. And then that's when they run into Asmira, who is part of been attacked by the bandits, and they save her. And she says she's never really spoken with the genies before. And she says, I'll help you get free, and I'll tell your master that you should be released for such good service. And so Kaba does end up following, his promise.
Before they were going to eat her. That was their other option.
Oh yeah, let's mention that. Yeah. Fakwal is like, let's eat her. Because, they're outside the boundaries of Jerusalem.
Right.
So, they can't eat anyone in the city. So they're like, we could get some energy out of this. But they ended up not eating her, because Bartimaeus basically is like, I have a good feeling about this one, so let's not eat her.
Right. Sorry, continue.
So, yeah. No, that was a good point. So Kaba promises to Asmira that he will release them. So he takes Fakwal and Bartimaeus basically down into his torture chamber, where there's all these like spirits trapped in bottles that are like basically in an eternity of agony, and they are confined, and that's what he's going to do to Bartimaeus with the spell of indefinite confinement, which basically puts a spirit into an object until it's released, and there's no length on it. And so technically it's a release from his control, because he won't be using Bartimaeus day to day to do his work, but it's a way to torture a soul indefinitely, which just shows you Kaba the Cruel's sadistic nature. He enjoys like death and hurting things, and he is very much Kaba the Cruel.
Long drawn out punishments.
Yep. And so Bartimaeus is told that he will be put in there by another spirit, and we learn that Amet, who is the Marid that Kaba first summoned back in Egypt when Kaba lived in Egypt, and that Amet loves Kaba, and he is no longer summoned like normal entities. He's kind of brought into the world without like all the legalistic jargon that goes with a normal summoning, and he serves Kaba, and they are companions.
Yeah, because Bartimaeus, he's trying to like barter with Amet and say we could both be free, which would have worked, except for what you had just said. Like, he actually likes and loves his master, which is atypical, seems like, for spirits.
Oh yeah, and it's anathema to Bartimaeus, who is just like, like, I can't believe you. Like, this is impossible. Like, how could you love a magician who tortures and harms our kind, and like you love him? And then Bartimaeus, he's a bit of a bungler, but he can do some stuff. So he like goes and distracts Amet, and then he like blows up all these like
old books,
containers. Yep, books and like containers that have gin in them, and basically make wrecks, Kaba's workshop. And then Amet gets a hold of him, and then he's put into I forget the object, but the spell of indefinite confinement takes Bartimaeus, and that's where his story at the end of part 2 leaves off.
Yeah, he's stuck in the bottle.
So what do you think about Bartimaeus's path here through the first 2 parts of the book?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think it was cool to see the the interaction with all the different Jinni as they're building the Solomon's temple, and getting the little details about. I commented earlier before we started the podcast with Gabe, in Bartimaeus' chapter, we get all of these little footnote type things throughout the book. So as Bartimaeus is talking about certain things, he'll like have these little sidebars of like, this is a word that I use, let me define it for you, or let me give you more context about something that happened there. There was one of them that was like, no, I'm not going to be able to find it. Oh yeah, it was it was at the end of chapter 2, and he was talking about some kind of cartwheel that he did. I know it says that prevented me from employing my usual elegant keynote maneuver in such circumstances, and then he comments about what this keynote maneuver was, and it says the evasive cartwheel, TM copyright etc. Bartimaeus of Uruk, circa 2800 BC. So, and then it talks a little bit more about what it is, but there's just like silly things like that in the book, which are I found were very enjoyable.
I just love the way that Jonathan Stroud builds out his world and his like vocabularies. I know one of the footnotes was like dismal flame, and Tyler asked me like, how does that work in the audiobook? Because I can't like just go to the bottom of the page and see what it is, and they just insert it where it's relevant. So like if they ended the sentence on like he held the dismal flame, then the second sentence is dismal flame, punitive spell that magicians use against their servants. So they just kind of insert it that way into the audiobook. But yeah, it's just you learn some of those things in the trilogy, but he definitely wants you to remember like the actual parts. And I was explaining to Tyler that this reminds me of like when I was in college, we learned like APA formatting, and this was a different format. Right. I learned this like in my history class where you have these kind of footnotes, which is different from APA. Mm-hmm. And I really like this, and you can tell that Jonathan Stroud has like a history background just because of the way he immerses you in the world, and like the fact that he put this in 950 BC, and that's right in the middle of this article we read, like Solomon's rule in Egypt. And I just feel like different authors bring different strengths to the board, and it's kind of like learning from someone. So I feel like I'm like when I'm reading this book, I'm also getting like a sense of what it's like to live back then and the concerns of the people just a little bit more than other books. So I like Jonathan Stroud for that, because I just like the way he integrates history and stuff into his books. Yeah, so I mean, I enjoyed a lot of the Bartimaeus stuff. I definitely like the ending scene where he's like fighting with Ahmet. That was a very intense scene, because you knew that Bartimaeus was like way out of his league, and he's like, I cannot contend with the Marid. I'm like, I'm out of my depth here. So he basically had to resort to like distraction and evasion. Like he couldn't just fight him straight up. He still fails in the end, but Bartimaeus strikes me as the kind of character who is like, he's super skilled and talented, and he thinks very highly of himself, it seems like, almost to his detriment. Like he thinks he can do more things than maybe he can, and then sometimes I think that's what he makes a fool of himself. So that's kind of my read on him as a character. Yeah, he does foolish things, and I just it is geared towards young adult, but I just find the humor in the book to be funny. Like when Bartimaeus is singing about Solomon's wives, especially the one from Moab, who apparently is a little rotund or larger. And
Yeah, it says in here that because Bartimaeus was caught, because he can change forms. He has like this human form that he likes to wear, but whenever he was caught by Solomon, he was in the form of a pygmy hippopotamus in a skirt, which is a reference to his wife from Moab. So that's another reason why Solomon was not very happy, because I think he knew that was a dig against one of his wives. Although if you have 700 wives, I don't know how it would be. I feel like it'd be kind of hard to keep them all straight in your head, don't you think?
It's just like, I mean, that is 2 wives per day of the year. Like, it's like, you can't esteem a wife
plus 300 concubines.
Man, he's just like, yep. He must have been a very virile man. Like, there, I said it.
There you go. You heard it here first.
He was blessed by the Lord. Okay.
That's right.
Sorry. I digress.
All right, that will conclude Bartimaeus discussion, although he will come up in Asmira's chapters in just a second. So yeah, let's talk about Asmira. And yeah, so as we mentioned before, she is charged with assassinating King Solomon, and so that's what she has to do. And at the beginning of her chapters, which is chapter 8, I think, so she is essentially taken through this desert by one of the spirits in the charge of Sheba. I don't remember if he was given a name or not, but do you remember if he was given a name, the spirit that she's with?
I'm not sure off the top of my head.
I can't remember. Well, here, I'll bring up this map here in the book. So basically, if you look down here at the bottom, that's Sheba/Merib. And so this spirit takes her all the way across this desert up to this little town of Eilat, wherever that is. However you pronounce that, I mean. So he goes all the way up to Eilat, or she does. And this is where she starts off, because she needs to get a... I don't know. Looking at this map actually now, I'm like, why didn't the... oh no, I think it's mentioned why. The spirit can only take her so far, because then they'll be in the realm of Solomon, and he won't let the spirits, I guess, go that far that aren't under his command.
Or that he'll like detect them or something.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That, yeah.
So he goes as far as he can and takes her to Eilat, which is where she's going to go get a camel, essentially. And there's she's like bartering with this camel seller person, and the guy like does not want to sell her a camel. He's like, shouldn't I be talking to your husband? Or like in that culture, like, the women didn't necessarily weren't the ones making the decisions. They weren't the ones out traveling the desert for just by themselves for no reason. And so eventually he's swayed just because she gives him a ton of money, essentially. And so yeah, I just thought interesting scene, just laying providing context for the culture that they're living in at the time. So she gets this camel. Also before then, I think as she's traveling to Eilat, we get these little flashback scenes giving more of her backstory. And we get a scene when she's a youth and she sees her mother, who was also a guard captain, if I remember correctly. There's some kind of attack on the queen's life, and her mother is killed defending the queen. And I think it was a cool scene because she basically took a shot for the queen, like she knew. It was like, how the Secret Service people, like, they're trained to, if there's an attack on the president's life, like, you're jumping in front of the president. Like, you're not trying to save yourself. You are there to save the president's life, which means your life is expendable. So that's what the people who sign up for the Secret Service, like, that's what they're aware of whenever they sign up for that. And a similar scenario here seems like what happened. So Asmira just kind of got this... at a very young age, like this sense of loyalty and devotion to the queen and to her country. And I think she makes this comment to the demon who takes her to Ilot, because she says, tell everybody thank you for me, and I think the demon says, or the djinn says something about like, you shouldn't thank those people, and I'm trying to remember the specific.
I think he says something along the lines of like they're sending you to your death.
Right. Yes. Yeah. She says, "Foul demon, if I die, it shall be for my queen. My nation has been attacked." And then she tells the demon that you know nothing of loyalty or love or homeland. So just like showing the contrast between like the demon's loyalties versus her loyalties. Like the demon is just a slave essentially, so he doesn't have any necessarily loyalty to the country, but she was born there and raised there, and so she has a different level of devotion to her country. So that was interesting tidbit of her character. So she's a true believer in the cause. So there's like a difference between
she's a patriot.
Yeah, she's like, there's a difference between someone who's just hired to do a job and who will be like, this is too much work, I'm not going to do it anymore because the money's not worth it to me, or whatever it is. But she's going to do it if she's paid or not, because she actually believes in what she's doing. So she's a patriot, like you said. So,
and I think that's an interesting, I feel like that's a characteristic that is just harder and harder to find. Like people who are like, yeah, I'll stand up and I'll die for America. The people that I see do that are like, in the armed forces, and if you've served, thank you for your service. But I just feel like, and that's something that's like kind of bred into you. I feel like when you go into the military, like a lot of people, it's like some people go into the military and they don't have that kind of like passion, and maybe they never get it. But like that's where I feel like I see it the most, is like in the military. But I just feel like so many people are ready to jump ship on America. I'm just like, come on, where's the devotion to our things are bad, but it's still our country. That's we are divided, but like the harder times will come down the road. Like I worry about Russia and China, taking over the world, and and that's we will need patriots at the time when we are asked to defend our homeland and defend our country, and where will we be without people who are ready to die for our country? And I'm really glad that there wasn't like a war like when I was 18 years old, because I was really scared to sign up for the draft. I was like, I don't want to be drafted,
Yeah.
And I'm just really glad that everything has been smooth sailing so far. So I'm just going to keep praying that we have no wars where people need to get drafted.
Yeah, we can definitely pray for that. We don't want to have any wars happening. Continuing with Asmira. So she gets her camel and she joins this caravan because they're traveling all together to reach Jerusalem, because it's kind of dangerous to travel by yourself in the desert, because there's no one to help you if something happens. So she travels with a group of people who are already going, and this is where we get a scene where you mentioned that. So like she has one opinion of Solomon, and one of the people,
Solomon the oppressor, basically.
Right, yeah. And so she has one opinion of him, and then this other person in the caravan has a different opinion, and he points out like all of the good things that Solomon has done. I don't know. Did you have anything that you wanted to expand on that, or? I don't know if I remember the specific conversation, but
yeah. No, nothing really for that scene. Just that basically her patriotism is being challenged for the first time, because we talk about echo chambers here in America where people surround themselves with people who are like-minded, and they just kind of get these things reinforced over and over again. And if you're in this set of guards, like you were told, like you're going to defend your country, you're going to protect the queen, and that's what you live and die for, and you just kind of get that over and over and over again. And like Solomon is a bad guy, he's here to take your country, you have to go kill him. And now she's out of the echo chamber, she's hearing new people's opinions, and
Right.
But she is so devoted that it's not swaying her. Like,
Right.
she's hearing it, but she's not being swayed by their talk.
Yeah, I found, because I actually highlighted this, I found the little conversation. So the camel master says, "What have you heard about him?" And then she says that he's a cruel warlord who threatens weaker nations. And then the camel master replies, "Well, there are many tales told about him, and I dare say not all of them are to his credit, but you will find many in this company who believe differently than you. They come to Jerusalem to seek his charity or to ask him to sit in judgment on difficult matters, no? You do not believe me? Ask them." And she says, "Perhaps I will." So maybe some inklings of her just being exposed to new ideas and new ways of thinking. I don't know that necessarily means that she's going to betray her country or like not follow through with what she's doing. But it may make her think and question if what she's doing is actually the right thing. I don't know. We don't really get any conclusion to that in this half of the book, so we'll have to wait for part 2. I actually don't remember. Have you read this book?
I have, yeah.
Okay. So as in our last book with the Powder Mage trilogy, Gabe knows all the answers and I am in the dark. So
I know some of the answers. I know where the last scene is going to take place. Well, the climax of the book.
All
and I know a little bit of the path of how we get there, but I forget all the ins and outs.
Nice.
Yeah. I'm interested to see your reaction because I think it'll be not what you expect, but we'll see.
That's good. I like a good twist ending. I don't like it to be very predictable. So continuing with Asmira. So basically they're traveling through the desert on their way to Jerusalem, and the caravan gets attacked by the bandits / brigands that Solomon has charged his little group of spirits to go out and find and defeat. And so the caravan gets attacked, and I think as far as I know, everybody gets killed except for Asmira.
I think that's correct.
Yeah. And she's using some kind of magic. It seems like she's got this like light magic from the sun god. But she's
it's more the silver. So that's something that's also in the trilogy, that the essence like reacts negatively to silver and iron. Those things can ward off spirits. And there's a description in the book in the trilogy that says they were approaching like this place filled with iron or silver, and it was like approaching a roaring fire, except the fire is like projecting cold energy instead of hot.
Right. Interesting. Okay. So I think, does she have like some kind of like pendant?
I think she has a
something?
talisman. Yeah,
okay.
A talisman that like protects her. And I also think that her weapons are either silver or iron, which means that they could actually affect the spirits versus just like other wooden things wouldn't really have an effect on them, or punching them wouldn't really have an effect on them.
Right. But yeah, so she's able to escape, which makes sense. She's a guard captain. She's trained her whole life to be, good in fighting scenarios, and so yeah, she's able to escape. And as she's like basically getting away, I think it's maybe like overnight she escapes or something like that, and then the next morning she meets Bartimaeus, and how did you pronounce his name? Fakwal?
Oh, Fakwal.
Fakwal.
Mm-hmm.
So
Fakwal, yeah.
She meets Bartimaeus and Fakwal, and this is where we have the scene where Fakwal wants to eat her, and Bartimaeus says, "Nah, I don't think we should do that." And so she convinces them. Well, she convinces Bartimaeus, and then Bartimaeus convinces Fakwal, more like that maybe she could follow through with what she said she was going to do, which is actually true. It's interesting because Bartimaeus believes in her for what she's going to do, and Fakwal doesn't. But whenever it comes to it, Fakwal actually does get released, and Bartimaeus is the one who doesn't get released. So the one who didn't believe actually got what is that?
Sent
the difference.
Back.
Yeah, what's that? Is it mercy or is it grace? Is grace getting something you don't deserve, and mercy is not getting something you do deserve? So, Faqual, I can't say his name. Faqual.
It's okay.
Is the recipient of, is the beneficiary of Asmira, and Bartimaeus, he is not. He does not get.
Well, it's because of the perversion of Kaba the Cruel here, because he's saying that he's going to leave it, but if we all have sin nature, and Kaba's is very well developed, so he's like, yes, I will let him go, but really I'll just put him in endless torment.
Yeah, and Kaba doesn't. He doesn't want to help Bartimaeus because he thinks Bartimaeus is the reason that he fell out of favor with Solomon, because Bartimaeus was the one caught not following the rules, and Kaba wasn't paying attention, and so indirectly it's Bartimaeus' fault that Solomon does not like Kaba anymore. And so now this is Kaba's form of punishment to Bartimaeus for putting him in the position that he is now in. So that's we get one scene where it's Kaba's point of view, and that's where we get his motivation for wanting to have the downfall of Bartimaeus. So yeah, and that's where we leave our story. We don't get any more with Asmira until the next section of the book, which I have not read yet. So that will be the end.
And it's been years since I've read this. All right, so this is the part where we do predictions,
right?
And
the obvious prediction is that Bartimaeus will somehow get out of his glass
indefinite confinement.
He'll get out of his conundrum that he's in, his problem. So somehow he's going to get out of there. Maybe Faqual will help get him out, or maybe Asmira will help get him out, because Asmira will need Bartimaeus to get close to Solomon. Maybe there's going to be some kind of team up there. That could be kind of cool. Because Bartimaeus, I don't think really likes Solomon. Doesn't seem like. I don't know. I feel like Bartimaeus is on nobody's side. It feels like he's on his own side. He's on.
He's definitely on. Yeah, he wants to be released. He wants to go home.
Right.
He doesn't care what happens to all these magicians. He doesn't like Kaba because he's cruel. He doesn't like Solomon because he's so powerful and he has all these magicians enslaving the jinn in the name of Israel. So he's not a fan.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. Those are my predictions. I assume. Yeah, I don't know. I'm wondering, like, how is Kaba like the bad guy in this story for Bartimaeus, or is it Solomon that's the bad guy? So I wonder if the climax of the book will be more revolving around Bartimaeus defeating Kaba, or if it will be more around having to do with Solomon and the ring. I mean, the book is named The Ring of Solomon, so I feel like it might have more to do with the ring, and maybe there has to be a team up with Bartimaeus and Asmira to overcome the power of the ring, or they have to figure out a way to defeat the ring. I feel like this is. You have to channel your inner Lord of the Rings and Frodo Baggins to defeat the power of the ring.
You did it again.
You have to take it all the way. You have to take it all the way to Mount Doom and cast it into the fire from whence it came. This you must do. But you'll need a fellowship to make it happen. So we're gonna need Bartimaeus. We're gonna need Asmira. We're gonna need Faqual. We're gonna need who else do we need? I don't know. We need somebody else. We need a better fellowship.
Yeah. Well, that might be the only fellowship you get.
Well, it's gonna be what it's gonna have to do. So, yeah, that's my predictions. I predict Lord of the Rings will happen in the end of this story.
Okay.
The ring will be destroyed. That's my prediction.
I think you did a good job. I think you did a good job on your predictions there. I like what you said. And
all right.
Some of it's accurate.
Cool.
Some of it is accurate.
Very good.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's my predictions. Yeah, I don't know. Do you have any final thoughts before we roll the outro here?
I'm just really glad I got to share this series with you. There's so many books I want to share with you and with the listeners that I've just enjoyed. Like the Bartimaeus trilogy was like one of my first staples. Like I read it. I think I read it in college, and then I just loved it. That I like listened to it like when I got my job, and then like a year would go by, and I listened to it, and then like I forget if the books were coming out or if they all. I think I was waiting on the last book. I could be wrong. I don't remember when you said that last one was published, but yeah, this has just been a great series in my life that I've always like come back to. Mostly the trilogy. Like this is maybe like only the second time that I've read this book, or the third, where the other ones I probably have read like 5 times over the course of years and stuff. So yeah, I'm just happy to share it, and yeah, we'll see. I'm interested to hear what you think of the ending here.
Yeah,
it's good. Like this next part of the book will be different from the first 2 parts of the book.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Tomorrow I will start reading it.
Me too.
So, yeah, there you go. So yeah, next episode we will be doing part 2 of this book, which will be chapters 21 through 38 if you are following along with us in the paperback or on audio or on Kindle or hardback. I don't even know. Is there hardback for this book? Probably, but any version you have.
I think so.
Yeah, so you can follow us on social media if you want. Pages of Light, just search us up. You'll probably find us on any of those social media platforms. And you can go to pagesoflight.com to see all the new stuff happening. And if you want to support the podcast, you can give us a review on your podcast platform, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening. And also subscribe on the YouTube if you want to watch the video version. You can also check out some of the other videos I've done in the past. I've done some book reviews and such. Definitely need to get back and doing other types of content besides the podcast. So yeah, eventually I'll get around to it. So stay tuned for all those things. And yeah, that is going to do it. Remember to keep reading and share the gospel with somebody this week. And we will see you guys in the next episode.
Bye.